Hey guys, tonight we're dimming the lights, fluffing the pillows, and drifting way back about 2,000 years back. Because tonight's bedtime ramble is about the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire is one of those things you've probably heard about 1,000 times. It's in every history textbook, half the movies set in ancient times, and, weirdly enough, it's also a meme. You know, the whole "how often do men think about the Roman Empire" thing. For some reason, it turns out the answer is, apparently, a lot. But rather than getting stuck on that, we're going to float along through what life was actually like. Not just emperors stabbing each other in the Senate, not just gladiators yelling in the Colosseum, but the day-to-day mess, the weird habits, the awkward family dynamics, and the strange little details that made the empire feel, well, like a place people actually lived in. So, close your eyes, take a slow breath, and imagine yourself in Rome around the 1st century CE. The empire's at its peak. Augustus, the first emperor, has done his job so well that people still talk about him like he invented peace. The Mediterranean, once a chaotic soup of pirates, wars, and bickering city-states, is now, well, only slightly less chaotic, but at least branded with the very serious label of Pax Romana, which literally means Roman peace. Because if you conquer everyone and crush all rebellion, then technically, yes, things are peaceful. Now, the empire wasn't just a little city with a few marble buildings. By its height, it stretched from Britain in the north, all the way to Egypt in the south, and from Spain in the west, all the way over to Syria in the east. That's a lot of ground, and also a lot of cultures, gods, languages, foods, diseases, and family feuds to deal with. Picture yourself stepping out into the streets of Rome. First impression, it's crowded, like really crowded. Modern Rome has about 3 million people. Ancient Rome, estimates go as high as 1 million. Which is honestly wild when you think about how they didn't have skyscrapers, cars, or even functioning sewage systems that could handle that load. Okay, technically, they did have a sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, which sounds like the name of a Harry Potter spell, but was actually this giant drainage tunnel that had been around since the Etruscan kings. It worked, kind of. But when you cram 1 million people into a city without modern plumbing, let's just say the air quality was not pleasant. The streets were narrow, noisy, and smelled like, well, everything at once. Baking bread, fried fish, perfume, smoke, donkey droppings, and, let's be honest, human waste. Because chamber pots were a thing, but taking them to the gutter and just dumping them out the window was also a thing. So, if you're strolling down the street, you want to look up occasionally. Because at any given moment, someone might yell, "Watch out," and dump yesterday's dinner scraps or wurstrate onto your head. Umbrellas weren't really a fashion item. The buildings themselves, tall, often 3, 4, even 5 stories high. They were called insulae apartment blocks, and, surprise, surprise, they weren't built particularly well. The poor lived at the top in cramped, rickety rooms, while the slightly better off lived on the lower floors. Fires broke out constantly. Walls collapsed. Think of them as the original bad landlord's dream project. Cheap materials, high rent, and when it all came tumbling down, well, that's just life in the empire. If you were rich, life was basically one long sequence of baths, parties, and politics. You'd wake up late, have a light breakfast, then head to the forum to gossip, sue your neighbors, or vote on something you didn't really understand. Later, you'd swing by the public baths, which weren't just for bathing, by the way. They were social clubs. People exercised, swam, got massages, listened to poetry readings, and ate snacks. Think of it like a mix between a gym, a library, and a Starbucks. If you were poor, your day looked a little different. You woke up early, worked in whatever trade you could, maybe bricklaying, or hauling goods at the docks, or selling figs in the marketplace. Lunch was bread, maybe with olives or cheese if you could afford it. Dinner was usually thin soup, maybe porridge, with a splash of cheap wine. The rich dined on stuffed dormice and exotic spices from India. You dined on barley mush. Now, Romans were obsessed with entertainment, and not in a Netflix and chill way. More like, let's cram 50,000 people into a giant arena and watch people kill each other. The Colosseum is the obvious one. Gladiator fights, wild beast hunts, sometimes even mock naval battles, because, of course, they occasionally flooded the arena for fun. Nothing says weekend family outing like a staged sea battle with real drowning sailors. But that wasn't the only option. Chariot races were even bigger. The Circus Maximus could hold up to 250,000 spectators. That's 3 NFL stadiums put together, and people were obsessed. They wore team colors red, blue, green, white, and rioted when their team lost at one point. A chariot racing riot in Constantinople got so out of hand that 30,000 people were slaughtered by imperial troops, all because someone's favorite driver didn't win. And for those who wanted something calmer, there were theaters, with Greek plays adapted into Latin, usually with more slapstick, dirty jokes, and awkward misunderstandings. Because if there's one constant in human history, it's that people love bad comedies. Well, Roman families were big on hierarchy. The father of the household, the pater familias, had legal authority over everyone: wife, children, even slaves. In the early days, he technically had the right to execute his own son if he wanted to. Later on, the laws softened a bit, but the basic vibe stayed. Dad was boss. Marriage was less about romance and more about politics or money. A wealthy Roman girl might be married off at 14, usually to some guy twice her age who needed an heir. Love wasn't expected. Producing children, preferably sons, was the point. That said, Romans weren't exactly prudish. Affairs happened constantly. Emperors, in particular, treated marriage vows like mild suggestions. Augustus, the guy who promoted strict family values, had a daughter who became infamous for her scandalous love life. Irony, thy name is Rome. Children, meanwhile, weren't exactly coddled. If a baby was born unhealthy or just unwanted, it could be abandoned, literally left outside. Some were picked up by slave traders, others died. The ones who made it grew up fast, helping with work or learning to read if their family could afford schooling. Boys studied rhetoric and law. Girls learned how to run a household because priorities. Romans had gods for everything. Jupiter, king of the gods. Juno, goddess of marriage. Mars, god of war. Vesta, goddess of the hearth. If there was a job, a body part, or a random household chore, odds are there was a god for it. The empire was like a divine buffet. As Rome conquered new lands, they just collected local gods and added them to the lineup. Egyptian Isis, sure. Persian Mithras, why not? It was like, but for deities. Religion wasn't so much about belief as it was about ritual. You sacrificed, you prayed, you burned incense, and you hoped the gods kept things running smoothly. If crops failed or wars went badly, obviously someone skipped a ritual. Emperors, especially, were obsessed with omens. A chicken refusing to eat before battle could delay an entire military campaign. Yes, mighty generals commanding tens of thousands of men would sit around waiting for chickens to nibble grain. Later on, Christianity arrived, and let's just say Rome didn't exactly welcome it with open arms at first. Christians refused to sacrifice to the traditional gods, which was seen as deeply unpatriotic. Persecutions happened. Then, in a classic Roman plot twist, an emperor Constantine converted, and suddenly Christianity went from outlawed cult to the official religion. Talk about a PR glow.